Now, the next presenter was Fred Schubester, who's my boss, and he's also the co-founder and CEO of Finder, and he would be covering the evolution of markets. He sends you his apologies, he couldn't make it, and so I'm going to, I hope you don't mind, split that into two, and I'm going to do both of it, including that evolution of markets, but I also thought it might be cool to talk a little bit about the other kinds of things you can do with blockchain that has very little to do with money. And I believe in a couple of moments we'll have a video pop up, and it's going to go smoothly. And I think this video, to give context ahead of it, paints a really interesting retrospective look into the past. And I'm going to use it heavily as an analogy for something that we can apply to when we look at blockchains and things like Bitcoin. I'm not sure if I need to do anything on my side. I was told it would take, a little bit of time to get it up because they're switching between computers. I may have only given it to them during that last presentation, so that one's on me. When you're, yep.
Back now at 56 past, I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little T.
Wi-Fi, yeah. Some of you may have seen this, but if you haven't, I think it's a real cracker. I guess in the meantime, how are we all feeling about our growing understanding? Do we feel better than when we started? Do you feel like you know more now than when you started today? Cool. Good. I think that's the plan. I'll be talking about some stuff in a moment that's relating in some part to other blockchains, but I'm going to make an effort to not try and say what those blockchains are, because they really do reside in a world that's a little bit more experimental. And I think that it wouldn't be fair for me to be like this. I kind of just don't like doing that because I think it's a highly competitive space. But I'll talk about concepts that I think will come sooner or later. I can see these guys trying really hard to get it up, and thank you. I know that I gave it to you last minute.
That's what I said. Mm-hmm. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it. I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard around big fight out in the lunchroom the other week.
See, there it is. Violence at NBC. GE com. I mean.
Well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that
massive computer network.
the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like a computer billboard.
It's not in. It's a computer billboard, but it's nationwide. Right. It's several universities and everything all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It came in really handy during the quake. A lot of people, that's how they were communicating out to tell family and loved ones they were okay because all the phone lines were down.
I was telling Katie,
But you don't need that. You don't need a phone line to operate internet.
No.
Okay. Thanks so much for getting that up on there. I think the point here is, and I think all the speakers today, in a way, kind of feel like the camera guy off screen being like, it's a large computer network. It certainly does have that vibe. The thing that I really like about it is you can imagine when the internet was new, and obviously now we all have the benefit of hindsight. It can do video and streaming and messaging and so many different things. You know, it helps commerce, and I don't need to explain it. And I think when the internet was new and you go, we have the internet and we have its use case, the application, and that's email. So if you're in that world, how do you say what the difference between internet and email is? Because they're effectively one and the same to your perspective. You don't know what internet can do. So the email is the internet, and the internet is the email. And I think that's kind of a really good analogy for things like Bitcoin. Can I click this now? Maybe. Can I go one more slide over? Maybe. Cool. Cool. Email, internet. And now I propose to you Bitcoin money. You know, a lot of what we've spoken about today, and probably even people with a relatively good understanding, and some people with a great understanding. Bitcoin is money, or some sort of financial thing, some sort of way to send value across countries globally, fast, secure, you know, and you've got this big blockchain you can rely on, ecosystem. I think we're all on that page. But is Bitcoin just about money, or is that the equivalent of being stuck in the comparison of email? And I suggest that most of you have probably heard this expression before. It's not about Bitcoin, it's about the underlying technology. It's about the blockchain. Have you all heard that before? And I want to now explain that there's two different types at a high level of blockchains. We have public blockchains, which is Bitcoin, which is Ethereum, and the vast majority of the ones that you see that don't come from enterprise, where anyone can participate. Then we have private, otherwise called distributed ledger technologies. I think that's sort of an attempt for them to not have to use the word blockchain at all, because that has sort of connotations that they don't want to be attached to. And private blockchains, or permission blockchains, can make a lot of sense. If I'm some big enterprise, perhaps a bank, and I've got 4 other big banks, and we have to share and maintain accurate records between ourselves of movement, and it might not be money, but it might be some sort of other transition, it might make sense for us to create our own little blockchain so that we run it, we do the effective mining and securing of that network with our own resources. We might not need to earn any coins or incentive for doing that because we're a business. We can just decide the 4 of us will secure this blockchain. And so then you can start to get things like much faster ability to share and sync data across 4 big businesses. And these 4 big businesses might be trusting in enough of that sort of closed ecosystem. So they definitely have a place. But what I want to explore is why the fact that they can, I think I used the fact that DLTs and private blockchains have a place, there are some things that they will never be able to do. And this, to me, is where I get the most excited about blockchain technology in general. In a blockchain transaction, such as Bitcoin, you can actually embed data into a transaction. So not only can you have an immutable record of a financial sort of movement, which is what we're looking at with some sort of money or Bitcoin, you can put data into this blockchain. And that data is then secured the same as everything else. Where it gets interesting, and I'm just basically going to go on like a ramble, is you can use software and build on top of blockchains using their ability to store data. And one really interesting area to me is in a space called Decentralized Applications. Now, on applications today, you open up your Facebook and you're used to the fact that Facebook holds your picture and they show it to you, or maybe it's LinkedIn or whatever social media. They hold your asset, it's your photo, they show you, and they might show your friend and their friend based on your privacy settings, but they also own it and they control it. And so maybe their engineers can look, and maybe there's risks in terms of them getting leaked and exposure there. But it's not just pictures, it's your interests, it's your connections, it's how you spend your time, it's how you think about and might be influenced towards things. And we see that Facebook captures all this data right now, and of course they monetize it. They show us all ads, and so does LinkedIn and every social platform. They show us ads. And the ones who are earning revenue off of the data that you create is these centralized entities. And they have that by virtue of basically being built in a time when that was the only way you could do it. Of course they had to control all this so they could build this infrastructure. With blockchains, we start to have ecosystems forming where you can prove to a blockchain, you can send a transaction and say, this is my identity, and now you can start to leverage applications where you own the data. And so if I might upload a picture and it's, let's say, stored and scrambled up in a little blob of data, stored in like an Amazon server or something, just online in a cloud, but no one can see that. So when I open my phone and I look at my picture, I'm saying, get it from this blob of data, use this password that I can prove I have, now I can see it. And if I want my friends to see it, I can give them access too. And it really, to me, it has massive implications. You can flip a lot of things on their head. Because it's not just a photo, it's also your interests and everything else as well. So maybe if I want advertisers to advertise to me, and there's some sort of way to have that anonymized and whatnot, I could earn that money. And I think that that's really powerful. And that's just one example. And the trick with that email internet thing is that it's not just Bitcoin money, blockchains, data for social media. You can literally just add more and more examples. So I guess I'll give you one or two more. You drive around for Uber right now and you earn 5 stars, and it's taken you some time to, you give people the bottles of water, the mints, you provide excellent music, good conversations as you're zooming along nice and fast, 5-star rating, and then a competitor comes out and they might offer drivers a slightly higher amount of revenue for their driving, and perhaps they charge passengers less. If you're the driver with the 5-star rating and you want to migrate over to using this new competitor's platform, Uber doesn't give you that 5 stars that you've created and earned to use on this new platform. But if there was a decentralized application that provided this sort of environment, you would own that 5 stars. And so you'd be able to carry it across and leverage it in other applications. And so there's a real network effect that starts to come about when you can achieve these kinds of things. Perhaps you want to go sell something online and you don't have a store and you don't have feedback that you are an honest seller. So you can start to pull in that you've done this for this app and you've earned this over here. And you build up a digital identity that you own and control. And I think it's things like that that get secured on a blockchain. And the reason that going full circle, it needs to be a public blockchain is because that's not something you would want stored on a private blockchain. Do you know what I mean? And see where we're going? It's kind of like the whole point is keep it spread out, keep it secure so you can put trust into it. Trust that money will work the way you want it to, but also trust that you can put things in there and rely on that mechanism so that you can get other advantages. And that's that. I thought that's what excites me. The next part that I would like to go through is really about the evolution of marketplaces, because I know a lot of you came to the gold days, and I think a lot of you in the audience, talking to some of you, have gold and bullion backgrounds, and you're familiar with how you buy and sell gold. A lot of it, if it's physical, you're going into dealers, you're going into, I guess they're all dealers, right? And, or I guess you could be trading some sort of ETF online. When it comes to cryptocurrency, it's a very different ecosystem. So I want to kind of cover off different ways that you can buy and sell and some of the things to look out for as well. And we've come a long way. We've got Mt. Gox here. I'm sure most of us have heard about it. But back when I first bought, you had to literally go to the bank and sign a thing to do an international bank transfer. You had to wait, and you had to wait for the Bitcoin to then hopefully land in your address. And you were trusting what was, Mt. Gox was originally a trading card, like a game website that you would trade cards on that decided to start trading Bitcoin. There's a lot of trust to place in that. And obviously it went under and all blew up and people lost a lot of money. Then we have sort of iteration in the space. And I think earlier I was talking about sort of how we've seen the gold industry evolve, and there's standards that different businesses use to kind of instill trust. And we have that in the crypto space. And despite it being a new space, there's a lot of investment and interest coming from people that have historical backgrounds in industries and financial markets. So it's not like it's started from scratch. It has, how an exchange works is pretty transferable to any asset class. I thought I'd cover off a few. But before I do that, a couple of rules to buying and selling. Fees are not necessarily a reliable indicator of value. You can look around at different platforms And if you see two platforms offering the exact same fee, it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever, let's say you're buying something, that whatever you put in, you'll get the exact same amount out. Different platforms will have access to different amounts of, in this case, Bitcoin, at that exact price. And so liquidity is a big factor to consider. If you want to buy $5,000 worth of something, one exchange might have the ability to sell you that at the current price, where another exchange that has a lower fee might not have that available and their price will slide as you buy it. And so fees are good to know about, but not necessarily what you're going to extract. The second part is that there can be a convenience cost. If you're new to the space, it's completely, it's wonderful that we have platforms that are nice and easy to use, but generally they do attract higher fees, and it's kind of this trade-off of things are really simple, and I'll explain some of these in a moment, but you just need to be aware of that. Sometimes it could be worth going and spending an afternoon to learn what an order book exchange is, or what your other options are, and how different exchanges are different. And that's kind of really the point of the awareness cost. I think that there's often an expectation that this is all too much. There's so many different choices, there's so many different places telling me they're the best. I think it's really just one of those things that you'll piece it apart together. And if you're starting, when you're starting, you don't have to necessarily understand everything. But it's just an iteration over time and working out, once you're comfortable with something, what is the difference between that and something else? Peer-to-peer marketplaces exist, and these are probably the only way right now to buy and sell cryptocurrencies without necessarily having to identify who you are. Regulators hate it, but there's also, I think it's very likely we'll see these implement policies where they do have to know who is using them. But this is very much something where you go and meet someone in a car park or I guess you could meet them in the police station or something if you wanted to feel safe. People are going to have varying levels of how close they want to get to there. We have order book exchanges, which I think are the predominant way to buy and sell, especially anything not too massive in size. And so in Australia, there's two really great ones. There's Independent Reserve and there's BTC Markets. Both of them have a long history, and both of them now have a reasonable amount of liquidity. So any kind of trading that you're doing under $5,000, you really shouldn't expect too much movement on those exchanges in terms of their price. And I know that plenty of you might understand this, but I think I found this a useful way to explain it. Two different exchanges are kind of like two different playgrounds. And so you're limited to buying and selling what's available in the playground. And so if something has more quantity of people wanting to sell it over here, it doesn't mean that there's the same reflected on another exchange. And so it can be useful to actually sign up to multiple exchanges so that when you do look to buy and sell, you can pick one that has, if you're selling, you can pick one that has a demand for buyers to get a better price on your trade. And then I've put Binance in here, but there's really a huge amount of global exchanges in the cryptocurrency space. Binance has probably held the pole position for a long time in terms of anything that's not, any kind of coin you want to get that's not on these local exchanges. These both have a limited amount. Binance has literally everything, and that includes the cool and exciting things and the absolute rubbish that you should stay away from. But how do you, hopefully by the end of the day, you might be able to identify what that might look like, I guess. There's loads of different exchanges. Automated and one-click services. I believe we have Amber speaking later today. These are the services that generally provide a super, super nice, clean way to get into Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Very simple to use, and some of them enable you to have automatic, weekly debits straight off your credit card. So you can just go $50 a week, $100 a week, and not have to worry about it. Very low effort. And I know that I said, there will be fees related to that, but sometimes the convenience is really valuable. And if you're someone new, there's no reason that that you should write these off for the small amount of fees, because they actually do provide quite a wonderful service. And then we come to HiveEx, which is us, which is where I work. Now, HiveEx is specialized in larger trading, and so we work quite differently to order book exchanges, we work quite differently, certainly to peer-to-peer marketplaces. All of our customers have to go through quite, I wouldn't say rigorous, we like to think it's a smooth process, but we need to understand who they are. Our trading volume starts at $50,000, and we can trade anywhere. There's basically no real limit. Once we get over about $5 million, we'll start to look at strategies for the particular client about how to execute that. And that might mean breaking it up into 2 trades throughout the day, or some clients might want to look at doing some sort of time-weighted thing where every day at a certain hour, they're taking a chunk. Because at anything above $5 million, you do have the weight to move the market if it's not executed with a bit of strategy around that. And yeah, I mean, it's a fairly simple process. It's not an exchange where you log in. It's not an exchange where you see prices automatically sort of updated there. This is in the over-the-counter world. So everything's still digital. We would create basically a chat room for each of our clients. Once they've approved to trade, we give them banking details. We can settle in pretty much every major currency. We can trade pretty much every coin in the top, I guess, 50 coins, cryptocurrency coins. Trading is met through talking to us in WhatsApp generally, or Skype. I'd like to trade, I'd like to buy $250,000 worth of Bitcoin. We offer a price, client confirms price, we settle. I understand that that's, it's probably some of you, but please come and talk to us at the HiveEx booth. We'd love to, if you are interested in that offering that we have, we can go into much more depth, but I don't want to bore everyone else. Any questions?
Supply is basically controlled by the Reserve Bank in Australia and through the IMF. And I can't see them willingly giving up control of the money supply. Do you think that most cryptos will be blocked by the government because they see it as a threat?
Okay, yeah. Good question. I think it's an interesting one. A government can't block a public blockchain if it's successfully reached a level of being decentralized. Bitcoin's obviously the strongest. The only way that a government can block a blockchain or the usage of it is, there's a couple of ways. They can regulate. We could be regulated as a business. They could say, we're not allowed to help people buy and sell cryptocurrencies of any amount. They could shut down the exchanges. They could forbid anyone to use it for any commercial reason. But the counter side to it is that it's this balance of regulation and innovation. If they do that, they still can't stop 2 of us sending Bitcoin between each other or any other coin. But what they risk is that talent will leave the country. And if this actually is a technology, and if we can get it to a point where we can build some really cool and innovative things on top that might help people get more value out of their data, like I spoke about, they might be risking a lot by doing it. I think that that's really a balance that we'll see some countries do well at and some countries fail at. I'm hoping Australia does well, so I don't have to go overseas anywhere. But yeah, it's a tricky one. And I think to your point about the IMF, I've forgotten what type of attack it's called, but there's this notion of their inability to hold cryptocurrency. At the moment, or at least the last time I looked at this, they weren't themselves able to include that in the body of currencies that they hold. And part of their role, I think, is to help, if a currency is struggling, they can help adjust the market because they hold a large proportion of it, and all of the member countries contribute to that. Now, if you were to see a future where Bitcoin dominance grew and perhaps people were trading out of US dollars into Bitcoin, we have 2 scenarios. One is that the IMF is unable to adjust that arbitrage that's happening so that Bitcoin continues to do well and the currencies in the IMF perform badly. And so in that scenario, it just becomes better and better to shift out of those currencies. And the other is that they could, of course, decide to get agreement from within the IMF to include Bitcoin, which would also be a fantastic thing. Sorry?
You have to give up control.
They'd have to give up control. What's that? Yeah, they would have to give up some control if they were doing that. Yeah, it's a scenario that they probably won't be happy about it, no. Yeah, I mean, that's my answer. Any other questions? We're good? One here. We've got a mic coming. One sec.
Yeah, when you talk about the information being embedded in each chain as it's progressing through time, where all those data are kept, because data would be growing over time. So would you sort of...
Yeah, there's a limited amount of data that you can embed in a transaction, and it also depends on what blockchain we're talking about. But the idea is that you can use reference data. So it might be a small, light amount of data that the transaction will contain anyway, just being changed, and then having software that is able to read that. So a lot of these solutions rely on using it to, here's my identity, it's in the blockchain, but everything else that I do, we're not relying on putting more resource and burden into the blockchain. We can build applications on top, and when I go to log in, we might have things like blockchain-based authentication. So rather than asking Google or Facebook to say that I'm who I say I am, I say, this is me, and here's my cryptographic proof, and then we don't have any kind of reliance on the centralized party. That's really the main usage that you'd use it for. Everything else can then sit on top and outside of the blockchain. That's the most innovative way I've seen it proposed and done. And some of these things are live and they work, but they're just super not where they need to be, and not where I'd feel confident to even talk about what they're called, because I don't want people buying it. I can buy more.
Yeah, my question is, when all the big players are having a currency war, where do the small countries like the Third World and the South Pacific countries survive?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I said, when the big players are having a war with their currency devaluation and Bitcoin, the Bitcoin comes in, crypto, how do the small players like the Third World and the really small countries in the South Pacific survive?
It's probably not an area that I'm the strongest at. I would say that, Bitcoin's permissionless, so anyone can decide that they want to participate, and so are most of these other blockchains that have some sort of legs. So individuals in that country can make that choice. They can exit out of their own, fiat currency that's being used, and we've seen that in countries like Venezuela, that has, they actually pay a premium on Bitcoin a lot of the time, compared to other countries based on the demand for it. I think in terms of what a government might decide and how they might decide, I think there's an opportunity for governments in other countries to just jump on the Bitcoin bandwagon or jump onto some other blockchain bandwagon, and rather than trying to create their own thing, just look at how can they leverage it to improve their living standards and things like that. But to be honest, it's outside of my real speciality or expertise. One more at the back.
Yeah, just in addition to the previous question, are you aware of any government buying Bitcoin as a backup, just like what happened in Venezuela, like those smaller countries where they have difficulty securing US dollar as a reserve? So just like, doesn't have to be any concrete answer, but just, is there any news or anything like that?
The news would say that North Korea buys a lot. I've heard that. I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure. I think if there was a country buying it as a hedge, anyone buying a lot, they're not going to be public about it, right? If they'd made a decision that they need to hold a lot, it would be done, very secretively, because as soon as that became public, the price would just go up and they'd get less value. And that doesn't just apply to countries; it applies to any big investors or funds. I can't speak to specific countries that have done too much there. Yeah, you're right.
So you're saying anyone can read the ledger for the Bitcoin?
Yep.
How readable is it? Is it like private IDs, so you have to work out who they are, or because you can find the individuals, can't you? Didn't they catch somebody that was stealing the money? And
yeah, so
you are identifiable on the ledger, right?
I mean, yeah, I think Alex from Nuggets shared a picture of a blockchain explorer. So on a blockchain explorer, you can see all blockchain transactions. And so if, let's say that I've bought a Bitcoin from you and you send me the Bitcoin, I can see that transaction. And because I can see that transaction, I can see where that Bitcoin came from. So that address that you've sent the Bitcoin to me, I now know that that's your address. Right? And so if you had everything in that one spot, I might know an estimate of your wealth. Most wallets, and we've got some talk on wallets later and security, they automatically shuffle your address. So every time you want to receive Bitcoin, you get a new address. Bitcoin transactions are not anonymous. They're not private. They can be, but they are what's called pseudonymous. They are anonymous and private until someone can tie you to one. So if I go to the cafe and I pay for the subway with my Bitcoin, it's probably not the best thing right now, but they would see, that would tie me to it, right? If I use some sort of service, I was buying a product and I said, send it, I'm paying from this address, they can tie me there. And so we have, this idea of, it's not, you should, if you're trying to do anything bad, it's not private at all. You can go through some steps to get there, but I challenge you to, no, it doesn't, obviously no, and privacy is a completely normal thing to want in the first place. Yeah, fair point. Cool. I think it's now afternoon tea. Thank you, everyone.